as I said, we're going to be answering the question why, but before we do that, because I want to spend so much time on ceremony, I thought we would start with what a ceremony is. So, do you have your phone with you? Mm-hmm. Tell me what the definition of, look up in dictionary.com or something, what a ceremony is. So,
yes, ChatGPT.
Yeah, if you want to, I don't care. So what is a ceremony? This is a problem because a lot of times instructors talk about ceremonies, but there's no clear definition of what a ceremony is. And sometimes people will say, oh, that's a ceremony. And once we go through my definition of what a ceremony is, in my opinion, it's definitely not a ceremony. And sometimes people do things that they think isn't a ceremony that in my definition of a ceremony, it is a ceremony. So what is a ceremony according to our dictionary?
Okay. I really like the sample sentence.
No sample sentences, just the definition.
A formal religious or public occasion, typically one celebrating a particular event or anniversary. Quote, we found a rabbi to perform the ceremony for us. An act or series of acts performed according to a traditional or prescribed form. Or the ritual observances and procedures performed at grand and formal occasions. Quote, the new queen was proclaimed with due ceremony.
Okay, so...
Formal, polite behavior.
So let's go, read the very first one, just the definition.
A formal, religious, or public occasion, typically one celebrating a particular event or anniversary.
Okay, so let's before we get into my definition, let's talk about how that deviates from what we already do. So we have this thing called the incense ceremony, that's purification ceremony, right, that we do. That is typically done by ourselves, not in a public setting at all. It's not religious and it's not in public. So that wouldn't even be considered a ceremony in that definition at all. But so let's go back. Let's talk about what I think a ceremony is. So the first thing I want to look at is our minds. And we spend a lot of time, doing meditation and all that to try to quiet our minds down, to cut through ego, to eliminate random and unnecessary thoughts, to dust. You always hear me say that expression, dust happens, is to dust our mind, to clear out those things that we don't need. So to me, one of the biggest parts of ceremony is our mind. So Schaefer, on the bottom of that page, can you write the word mind, please, in the middle? Now, how do we gauge the quality of so right in the very bottom in the middle, just write the word mind. How do we gauge the quality of our minds? I mean, so in our cars, we have oil pressure gauges, we have gas gauges, we have gauges to gauge the quality of our engine, to tell if there's too much oil pressure or if our battery's about to die. So we need to have ways of gauging the quality of our mind. And this is all going to tie into ceremony in a second. And we have two ways of doing that. Middle, left side, right, manners. So these are the 3 M's. Mind, manners, and on the right side, movement. So we use manners and movement as a way of gauging the quality of our mind. So we have 2 what we call partial reflections of our mind. One is manners, and that is a partial reflection. So draw a line from manners down to mind, and draw a line from movement down to mind. So manners is a mental reflection of the quality of our mind. So you can write mental on the line that's going down. Just write mental. And movement is a physical reflection of the quality of our mind. So think about it. We ring the gong, right? And I told Master Taylor I would teach him how to ring the gong correctly when we're here at some point. And that is a physical movement, and you can tell the quality of someone's mind based on how the bell is being rung. And when I do Dokcham, I sit there and listen to the person ringing the gong or the bell before he comes in or she comes in, and I can usually have a really good guess as to who it is, right? Because the sound of that is a reflection of the quality of the person's mind. It's not, and there's a couple things. Yes, it's an indication of the quality of their mind, but it's also like a shadow of their mind in general. So if someone like Master Van He is very like hyperactive, like had just drank 5 espressos like every day. So he would come up and be like, because you have to ring it twice, right? He'd be like, ding, real fast like that and very short, not hitting it hard. And you're like, oh, that's Master Van He, right? And you get someone like Grandmaster Humble would ring it. It's like, right? And it's very slow and short. So he's not quite like this. So you can tell the quality of a person's mind from a physical movement. You can tell the quality of someone's mind through their manners. So manners, we're talking about yes, some manners have physical movements involved. For example, bowing, that's part of manners. There is a physical component to that. But think about how many people have bowed to you, and you can tell that there's absolutely no respect whatsoever there. It might not even be respect. You can tell they're just not in the moment of the bowing, and that is a reflection of the mind in a mental sort of state. Okay, up above both of them, but not all the way up, right ceremony. In the middle. Okay, so what makes a ceremony? There are 3 levels to a ceremony, which we're going to talk about in a second. But for example, how do we take manners? Let's use the example of the bowing. Is bowing to someone, and I don't want an answer, I just want you to think about this. Is bowing to someone a ceremony? And my answer is it can be, but it might not be. So for a manners practice to be a ceremony, there has to be a predetermined physical movement that has to take place with the manners for it to be a ceremony. So draw a line up to ceremony. What did I label it on here? Yeah, must have a predetermined movement. So draw a line from manners to ceremony, and write must have a predetermined movement on that line. So in other words, if I wanted to, let me see, let's do the other one would be easier, but let's say we have a manners of calling, you see me and you say, good morning, sir. That's manners, right? However, it's not a ceremony because there's no predetermined movement that you have to do along with saying, good morning, sir, for it to become a ceremony. Now, you could do a physical movement, but if it's not set in stone as predetermined, it isn't an actual ceremony. So for example, if Master Taylor comes out in the morning and he just comes out and he's like, good morning, sir, like this, there's movement, but that's not predetermined. It wasn't set, this is how you have to do this. So because of that, that's not a ceremony. However, if there was some predetermined thing, like let's say every time I saw Grandmaster on, I would see him, I would bow a very specific way. Oh, we talked about this the other day. So when Grandmaster Galano, there is a way of bowing. Did you talk to him about this? Okay. If you wanted to formally bow to Grandmaster Galano, how do you do it? Oh, you just proved me wrong. Schaefer's like, I've never even seen that. I showed her how you bow. I showed them how you bow, and they were like, I've never even seen that before.
With the sticks?
No sticks. Just you walk into his house, he stands up, you're standing there. Both of you are unarmed. How do you bow? There's a specific way you're supposed to bow to him, and I can't believe you didn't do this. I should have taught you, then it would have blown his mind. So in Kali, yeah, you grab the person's hand, you turn it up so the back of their hand is there. You step back with your right foot, you put your left hand on the ground, and you bring the back of their hand to your forehead. That is a ceremony. There's predetermined physical movements that go along with the manners. Does that make sense? Since you were okay. So movement. For movement to be a ceremony, you have to have predetermined manners to go along with the movement. So write that. Movement to ceremony. So for example, let's say we just talked about how to bow to Grandmaster Galano. So let's say you go in and you think Grandmaster Galano is just not a great Grandmaster, but you're there because I dragged you there and you have no choice but to bow to him, right? And you grab his hand and you put it up to your forehead and you put your hand to the ground and you do that. But you can tell that there's no respect and there's no manners there at all. That is just a physical movement. That is not a ceremony. I know this seems a little you're really going to have to think about this a lot, but this is how ceremony, what makes a ceremony. I can't tell you how many times, here's an example. As all of you know, I don't believe in having rank on belts. The Taekwondo school that my Taekwondo instructor founded, it still exists. Right now they have almost 400 students at this school. And you go in, most of them don't know me. They've heard of me, but I could walk in there and as long as some of the higher ups didn't see me, no one would know who I am. I probably. And but once they find out, they come up and they stand at attention, they bend forward, they slap their legs and they do this. That's 100% movement. They have no idea who I am. They have no respect for me whatsoever and they shouldn't because they don't know who I am, right? I could be some sort of crazy guy that's a serial killer or something. They have no idea. So there's no manner component to that bowing. However, there are people there that do know me and they come up and they have a very specific set of movements and they have manners to it, and that bowing I would consider a ceremony because of the fact that they have components of both of those. So, is it possible to have a ceremony that's manners with a physical motion, but we don't have the movement that's a reflection of the mind? So, is it possible for someone to come up to me and bow to me as a ceremony, but yet there's no physical movements that are a reflection of our mind in that? Again, I'm sorry, this is kind of tricky, but the answer is yes. Here's an example. So if someone comes up to me and like I just said, they put their hands at their side, they bow, then they bow. So that the manners is there that they are actually, they know, okay, that's probably an example of there's two examples. Let's say they have manners. They have the manners, which is the respect for me, which is that. But their physical movements are they just slap their legs and they bow like this. That is a ceremony that has the manners, but the physical movement is a very poor representation. It's not precise. So let's use this. Their movement is lazy. Their manners is there, but their movement is lazy. That's still a ceremony. But it only has the one component. It only has the manners component. Is it possible to have movement and predetermined manners, but but the manners are lazy? Yes. That's someone that comes up and has a perfect bow, but you can tell that they're just like, I'm just doing this because I have to. So their manners are lazy, but yet they have perfect movement, but they have lazy manners. So they do have a component of manners in there, predetermined manners. They just don't have the non-lazy manners, if that makes sense. So if you have one and not the other, I consider that a level 1 ceremony, which means there's a ceremony, but it's the lowest level ceremony you can possibly have. If you have both of these, then that's a level 2 ceremony, and which means you don't have lazy manners and you don't have lazy technique. So if I go up and I ring this bell, and you can tell I'm very respectful, I'm really in the moment for ringing the gong or the bell, and I ring it like ding, 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 and it's the physical movement's lazy, that's a level 1 ceremony. It is a ceremony, it's just the lowest level. Or I go up, I'm like, the bell, the gong, I gotta ring this, this is ridiculous, but I do it anyway, and I ring it perfectly. My physical motion is spot on. There is the manners component because there's predetermined manners that go with it. It's just they're lazy manners. Then that's a level 1 ceremony. However, if I go up to that gong and I'm very respectful, I know how important this gong ringing is. I do the motions as perfectly as I physically am able to do it. That's a level 2 ceremony. Okay, does that make sense? I know it's early in the morning for this. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Later on in the week, we're going to talk about a level 3 ceremony. That's going to connect us to a lecture that I just posted on YouTube, which is this interconnecting web concept that I talked about in that with the people that came early. Those of you who have seen it before, it's when I put the sphere on a sheet and they have other spheres that are that we've talked about. So I really elaborated more on that, and I did put a video up on YouTube about it. So if you incorporate, which we call, I hate this word for when we talk about this because it makes it sound like it's a religious thing. It isn't. But because the Native Americans called it the spirit that moves through all things, I use the word spirit. So we have a third component on top, which is, so just right on the very top, write the word spirit. Again, non-religious. We can call it energy, chi, ki, whatever you want to call it. If we have that component in it, then it becomes a level 3 ceremony. You cannot have that without having the other two. So you can't have just a ceremony that manners and movement is lazy, but spirit isn't. That doesn't exist. You have to have non-lazy manners and non-lazy movement, and then incorporate this fabric of space-time, or whatever we want to call it, in to have a level 3 ceremony. Any questions about this ceremony thing before we move on?
Can you summarize the 3 levels? So if one of those...
Okay, so let's say movement is lazy. Or for movement, it's easy. You can tell if movement is off. So for example, if I'm supposed to do, I'm seeing if I can see this. If I'm supposed to do an inside-outside block like this. So if I do that like this, that's being lazy, right? Especially if you know the person can do this. If the person has a physical limitation that their wrist won't straighten and it's like this, that's different. I'm talking about if you know someone can do this perfectly, and yet when they're doing the ceremony that they think they're doing, if they're just like this, that means their movement is lazy. So then that would mean one of those of the 3 M's, one of those is not present. The opposite would be, this is perfect, right? But there's no manners. The mental reflection of our mind is just like a television where you're trying to tune in a TV station and you barely have connection and it's like all fuzzy and all that. That's lazy. That's a lazy manners section. But if you're focused, both are there. So yeah, if one of those two is lazy, but one of them isn't, then you have a level 1 ceremony. If both of them are not lazy, then you have a level 2 ceremony. And as I said, we need to come up with something other than spirit. Maybe we can actually do that tomorrow as a group, figure out what we're going to call that. So think about it. When we bring this interconnecting web into it, then we have a level 3 ceremony.